There's an Equifax hearing going on in Washington as we speak, but there are bigger issues we got to tackle today.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
What I mean by that, there's so many things we have to talk about technologically, and one of our new advertisers, not new to me, Whalley Computer Associates, that is housed in Milford, Mass. And headquartered in Southwick, Massachusetts, way out there in Western Mass, you know, past 128, past 495, past Worcester. Do you know, there's a whole Massachusetts over there. But they just grew into Providence and have opened up offices here in Rhode Island. And they're old friends and a terrific company worldwide with a local touch, so to speak. I think that's kind of their branding. But they've got a lot of expertise on things like ransomware, cybersecurity, what happened with the Equifax breach. So we'll talk about that coming up a little bit later on. Great to have you in on this Wednesday evening. But in the meantime, we ought to cover some things that are happening both in Washington and here. I mean, clearly the elections yesterday were provocative on a couple of different levels. The New Jersey gubernatorial election went decidedly to the Democrat. And I wouldn't get all hepped up about the Trump factor in this particular race because Chris Christie, I've never seen a politician so immensely popular fall from grace over a gradual period of time as deeply as he has, with some kind of 15% favorability rating in New Jersey. And he almost handled the last few months almost like a mic drop, kind of like, boom, I'm out of here. Even competing for a sports talk radio position at the major radio station in New York, WFAN, which is just quirky. I mean, this guy is a U.S. attorney, doggone near presidential candidate, was, of course, almost got that nomination, ends up playing a significant role in the transition team for Trump, leads the state of New Jersey, and I thought pretty well for a long period of time, and now has absolutely no legacy to work from. It might have been the last straw when he closed the beach for weather purposes, but brought his family to the state beach. And when asked about it, said, "Hey, you run for governor. You get to sit on the beach." Anyway, his lieutenant gubernatorial, well, his partner, lieutenant governor, got swamped by the Democrat. In the meantime, in Virginia, this is what all would say is a litmus test on Donald Trump. This, Democrat ends up winning the race, and interestingly talks about unity at the end of the evening.
Today, Virginians have answered and have spoken. Virginia has told us to end the divisiveness, that we will not condone hatred and bigotry.
There were a lot of Republicans who lost seats across the board in the statewide races in Virginia. And a lot of folks are quick to suggest that this is a Trump factor, that the 35% max that Donald Trump has is now starting to rear its head, right? Well, know one thing, that the suburbs in Virginia are a little bit different than middle America. So I wouldn't be counting out the Trump constituency having an impact on the 2018 election still. And these are snapshots in time, not necessarily a predictor of what's going to happen next fall. I thought the president actually struck a lot of the, I think, controlled tone, other than the pitch for his golf course and his reference to the LPGA in Korea last night. I don't know. It's like you can't bring him anywhere. But for the most part, the message in Korea and China has been close to the right tone. There are things that can still happen with this administration that can calm the nerves of Americans. So 2018 is hardly predictable at this point. But I think it's an interesting bellwether for the challenge that Republicans have, which is that you seemingly have to go Trump's way in order to win a primary, but in order to win a general, you got to go in the other direction. And how you thread that needle is going to be an interesting exercise for all elected officials, even here in Rhode Island, and wannabe elected officials in 2018. All right, on the issue of elected officials, this is tough stuff. This is bad news for those of you who wanted to see the Paw Sox grow here in Rhode Island. Headline here, Ted Nesi kind of popped this out online earlier today. It's a story that I actually had for you as well. I understand, as Ted reports, that there was a torrid meeting at the State House. at the Speaker's office on Friday afternoon, where Larry Lucchino, the boss of the Paw Sox, and the Speaker went at it pretty hard. So much so that folks could hear the screaming in the hallways. It was not healthy, and the message that the Speaker of the House reportedly had for Larry Lucchino was, we're not going to take up your vote in 2017. Now, interestingly, the Senate is still going through its diligence and trying to get the right kind of legislation to vote for out of Senate finance on the new Paw Sox Stadium deal. Now, if the Senate decides that they're going to do this, it'll put a little bit more pressure on the House to take this thing up, but I can promise you it's not going to happen until after the holidays. And the anger that I think probably exists right now between at least the Speaker's office, which at the end controls most things, and the Paw Sox management is at least this high level that the Worcester consultation that's going on for that city government right now may end up getting accelerated, and the courting may be a little bit more intense between Worcester and the Paw Sox, which I think is just awful. And why does this happen? A couple of things. The 38 Studios malaise, the 38 Studios anger with the public, the notion that we never, ever, ever, ever want to have a public-private partnership again, the resentment for people who have money, all those kinds of things. But, you know, in the end, we have a situation here where if we don't get this deal done one way or the other, we got a city of Pawtucket which is trying to turn its life around, which will be left with a really, really, really sad story. And 2 and 3 and 4 years down the line, we will be all in agreement. All of the anger and the, all of the political on this will dissipate, and everyone will kind of look at each other and say, oh yeah, things aren't so good. And even the Paw Sox left Pawtucket without the details to remember. The real reason, though, politically that this is happening is because Nick Mattiello had a race in his district. A guy by the name of Steve Frias is either going to get the credit or the blame for this, because the Speaker, for some reason, can't seem to get out of his own way in District 15. They are door knocking in his district right now. He's terribly worried about re-election in District 15 come next year, and that is the pressure that he's most responsive to. It's fascinating. In the meantime, same kind of story here. DMV hearing, the the DMV story with a $250 fee. Did you follow this? This headline is fascinating. This whole story is fascinating. So in 2009, the state government passed, a whole bunch of motor vehicle registration law, including but not limited to you and I being hit for a $250 fee if we didn't renew our inspection on time. But the computer system was so broken, speaking of computer systems, the computer system was so broken that they couldn't make it work. They couldn't trace the inspector guy at the gas station sending the message to the DMV and then hitting you for $250 before your registration came up again. Or in fact, the 30 days that you have to rectify your inspection sticker and your registration going away. Anyway, they couldn't get it done. So Gina Raimondo, our governor, decides, you know what, we're going to get this thing done now because we got the computer system. We've been 7 years late in implementing the law. Well, the two of them, the Speaker of the House and the governor, got together on the phone the other day and both agreed that it was way too much for us to pay.
Put a burden on people. That's a lot of money. $250 is a lot of money.
Because these are regular folks that tend to have older cars that have to spend a lot of money to get them inspected, and if they just don't get it done in time, another $250 can be substantial and sometimes devastating.
And look, I'm not going to sit here and clamor for a $250 fine, but this is like a banana republic. Think about this. The legislation was passed in 2009. I understand the implementation was delayed because they couldn't figure out how to do it. But then the computer system is up and running and the governor says, okay, this starts in January. The Speaker, again, responding to worries about his district, decides just to pick up the phone and call the governor and say, you know what, let's not do this. Wait till we revisit it come next session. And the governor, who doesn't want to enforce a $250 fine because she's already like this politically, says, yeah, okay. Leadership and understanding of the Constitution would have required the governor to say to the speaker, you know what, if you don't like the law, change it. If you find it to be urgent, get in here and revote it. But the idea that we can have an existing law that the governor says, yeah, okay, let's just not enforce it because it's not politically palatable, is banana republic-like. Now, you're not going to complain, right? Because it's $250 you don't have to worry about yet. But think this stuff through. There is this is near chaos in this place sometimes. It really is. And finally, trying to bring a little bit of constancy, I guess, to the East Providence governance. Election day yesterday, the good people in a phone booth in East Providence decided that they would rather have a mayor running the city than a city manager, which is fine by me. It's really the druthers of the local community as to how they want to govern themselves. But take a closer look, 4% of the registered voters came out to make that decision. 4. People lose their lives for an opportunity to vote. 4%. Let's clean up your computer life when we come back.
Do you know, was anything done when the breach was known and when it became public?
Specific to the veterans?
Specific to government agencies in particular, but specifically to government agencies in particular, but specifically to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs and to the Department of Defense.
Not that I'm aware of.
So you just left our veterans exposed.
I'm just saying, not that I'm aware of.
Not that you're. Well, I'd like to know. So,
this Equifax thing just keeps going on and on. Dan Leclerc is from Whalley Computer Associates that has now grown its worldwide business into Rhode Island. Welcome to the program. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Dan and I have a hometown in common. I lived in his hometown in Western Mass for 15 years, and we're just talking some. You want to talk some Agawam Mass politics?
Oh, I don't know if I'm qualified for that, Dan.
You are the guy that heads up the technological stuff for Whalley Computer Associates. We're going to tell you about Whalley Computer and what kind of a business it is in our next segment. But what's your take on all that's going on with the breach of Equifax specifically?
I think the major point that, from a technology standpoint, that everybody's finally realizing is the internet brought a lot of great things. It also brought a lot of vulnerabilities, and people are asking for instant access to information, instant access to data. They're asking for things to happen quicker, faster. Well, there's a vulnerability when you start to put things out there and consider what the security risks are when you start to use public networks and those kind of things for storing sensitive information.
I've had various people on radio and television talk to us about the Equifax breach and whether or not this is something that is really going to upend Americans' lives or whether it's just something you've got to be aware of, and in the middle, I don't know, is probably the truth. I mean, what is it that you're most concerned about everyday Americans with this specific dilemma?
I think the one thing that everyday Americans have to understand is the targets are no longer the main computer systems. The people trying to get at this information are targeting what we call the endpoint or the nodes on the network. And in our industry, IDC is one of our big data gathering entities. Their
IDC.
IDC. It's like a Gartner group.
Okay.
Their statistics today say that every working American typically has 2.4 screens or more than one device. Right? We all have a laptop, a desktop. We now have a phone. We have a watch. So think of every person in average 2.5, 2.4 screens. That's 2.5 more points where they can attack you. It's no longer just protecting one device.
Is protection easy?
Protection is not easy. It's not set it and forget it. It's not do it once and hope that you did it right. It's an ongoing process, and that's really the biggest concern, is people will do it, but they don't always stay up to date with it, and that's really where most of the breaches come from.
Is the problem equitably, and the exposure and the liability equitably spread across both personal computer use and company computer use?
I think in the technology world, that's really where the lines are becoming grayer. The separation between personal and business is now actually being driven by the workers, that they don't want that much separation. They want to be able to use things like Facebook and Twitter and services that we call social media. Those are now considered viable business applications, and they have a viable business use. But
Right.
when you start to merge those social applications and social networks into business, you create additional vulnerabilities.
Why? Because Facebook and Twitter and the social media, the Instagrams and all that kind of stuff, are they less secure?
I wouldn't say they're less secure by nature, but they're more attack points. The lines are becoming less...
Because of the number of users?
The number of users, correct. The number of endpoints that you have, the number of devices that you put on the network. You know, we all bring our phones to work, we bring our tablets, you know, our homes might be part of our networks now. Working from home is pretty much almost an acceptable policy now. Well, when you work from home, you have to have access to your data. So that means the access to your company data is now from your home. And if it's not done securely, then that becomes another attack point for the people trying to get at your data.
Tell me about this ransomware thing. This is wild. The idea that your computer gets actually held up until you actually kick in some dough, and then they release whatever C's they have of the computer. What up with that?
I think the biggest thing that people don't understand is it's not big attacks that are actually propagating. It's the smaller attacks for smaller amounts of money that businesses look at it and say, I can pay a small amount and be done with this and move on, versus trying to fight it.
Are you finding more companies doing that rather than just pay off
There
the
are
nuisance?
some companies that just will pay it off because they don't want to.
At what kind of price?
You know, some of them could be $500, sub-$1,000 attacks. And a business might look at that and say, I'm going to spend more time in my IT department.
And how do you deliver the brown bag with the payment on a technological level?
It's all through what they call Bitcoin. It's kind of like the commerce of the black net, or the, you know, that space where the attackers live.
It's wild. I
It
mean,
is.
you've been in this business for decades. I mean, the acceleration of the technology and the troubles that come along with it, are they commensurate?
They're growing every day. That's the other
trouble in the technology,
Yeah,
the good of the technology and the trouble of the technology, are they growing at the same warp speed?
No, I think the vulnerabilities, the challenges are growing, I think, exponentially compared to some of the other advantages. Sure, we're taking leaps and bounds every day with what the technology can do for us. And I guess the challenge is sometimes you don't always hear about the good, you hear a lot about the bad. But you know, for just as many people that are out there trying to you know, make things safer, there's hundreds more trying to attack it.
I want to come back. Some of the basic advice that Dean offers both individual and corporate customers, and what you can do to keep yourself protected. Stay with us. Welcome back in. So Whalley Computer Associates is quite the story. Paul Whalley and his brother John and the whole team, and they have turned into, you know, I knew them when. I know you guys when. You know, small business. It's now grown into a business that is located regionally, but you have worldwide customer base. And,
Correct.
And you're in the middle of all that fascinating computer space. What is it about this company and the advice and the delivery of product that you can bring that's unique about the industry or for the company?
I think what's really allowed us to grow and become, you know, a stronger company over the years is, we like to say we're customer centric and vendor agnostic. So we're listening to our clients' needs and trying to find what matches with them. And we're a large enough company where we represent all of the major brands, all of the major products.
And I know I've been in the facility, and is it fair to call it the warehouse? It's a huge facility. There's every product coming in every which way and where, and you guys are in problem-solving mode for a lot of companies out there, grabbing whatever the technology is that applies, right? So,
Yep.
So you're not married to a label, is what you're saying?
Correct. Yeah, we're a large enough company where we matter to all the major players, to the Dells, to the Hewlett-Packards, to the Lenovos, the IBMs. We do enough volume with each of those brands that Paul Whalley has a voice. So if we have a problem, Paul Whalley has a voice to be able to reach out to the players and solve the problems for our client. From that standpoint, as a technician and a technologist, I can go in and meet with the client and recommend what I think is the best product, not the best brand.
Is that a consistent recommendation, depending on the project?
Absolutely. What we try to do is find out what the client's standards are. So if they've had a relationship with a brand for X amount of years, we're not looking to displace that relationship, we're looking to add value to it. So there's a reason why an end user might have already had a success with a certain brand, and most likely we already work with that brand, so we're just going to add value to that relationship using our local presence.
A lot of companies still have an IT person, or do they rely on vendors like you, or companies or consultants like you to actually take over that role?
We deal with clients that have both. I think the biggest trend in an IT space is IT is no longer thought of as necessarily a cost, but a lot of people are looking at IT as a business advantage. So the IT person now has more of a strategic role in the business than just supporting being able to use a printer or being able to store a file.
What is this kind of differentiation between Whalley and this VARs concept, this value-added resellers concept?
We are what the industry would call a value-added reseller, so that's our space. Right. That when you categorize our business, I think our differentiators are that we are large enough that, again, we have the value, we have the buying power, we work with national, international companies, we have product on our shelves, we work with local businesses to have what we call next day fulfillment or next day inventory. So they don't have to wait 2 weeks for product to come from overseas or from Texas or where the product might be stored by the manufacturer. But we're still a family-owned business, and we're small enough to have that local touch.
Give me the best advice you can for both corporate and individual computer and technology purchasers right now. What's the one thing in 30 seconds they should? What's the default thinking that they should have?
I think the default thinking is your vendor that you're working with part of your team? Are they working with you and listening to your needs just as much as they're telling you what they can do for you? And sometimes the listening and trying to understand what the business is trying to accomplish leads us to the technology solution.
Where are we going in this business?
We're going faster, bigger. It's not getting smaller.
No.
Everybody wants it now. They want their information 10 minutes from now. They don't want to wait for it. They want their information before they need it.
You've seen a lot in the decades you've been working this business, huh?
I have.
Tough to keep up?
It's fun to keep up. I think that's what I like about the business, and I will like about Whalley Computer is I get to meet with clients all over the state of Rhode Island, all over New England. Cool. And I get to share what I know and what I learn from other clients.
Well, we'll keep in touch with you when we have technological issues out there. Dean, good to see you, man.
Thanks, Dan. Nice seeing you.
Final word when we come back. Stay with us. Right, so the 2018 race is on. It's kind of like, the 2018 cars are out. We still have months. It's not even Thanksgiving yet. But the mayor of Cranston has announced he's seeking a second try at the governor's race. He'll be here. Alan Fung tomorrow on our State of Mind. See you on the radio at 3 on WPRL. Thanks for watching. Good night.